Hey, look, guys, there's a lot of questions that have come through Slido. Others have spoken to me. So I'm trying to fuse these together. A bit like last night, we've got just over 40 minutes. And for our panel, many of the questions today will actually put them to all of you, and for those of you who do want to respond or not, but a couple of particular questions as well to each and every one of you. But one of the themes that was coming through the Slido questions to me, and I phrased it this way, is has our societies, so not just New Zealand, Canada, the US, Australia, has it lost its soul, the understanding of the depth of what it means to be human? And as each of you spoke, like Jeff this morning, you were talking about the focus on the LGBTI aspect or the gender identification when there's so much more to being human. Carolee, Dawn, both of you talked, and be it pornography or also the gender. Again, we are objectifying human beings. We're reducing humanity to something so small. And of course, Amanda, when it comes to euthanasia, we're taking things such as physical well-being and making that the absolute over everything else it means to be human. And if I might, Dawn, start with your good self. Have our societies lost its soul? Has it lost that broader sense of what it means to be human?
I would say no. There's a war here happening for us as we fight for human dignity and for the truth. But that fight is we're winning. I believe we're winning. As hard and heavy as all of this stands, I think that the gospel is here on the earth, and people are hearing God's word, and they're feeling the truth, and they're seeing it. They're seeing through all the confusion and the darkness, and there's this growing movement globally for, a return to kind of connection, to love, to family. I'm really optimistic. I do not think that we've lost our soul.
That's great. Jeff, what about your good self? Has society lost its soul, or is it refined it in different ways?
What day of the week is this?
You're in New Zealand. There's about 650 people out here. They speak strangely.
I fluctuate back and forth. I had kind of a picture 10 or 20 years ago of this dark wave coming across America, and from Washington, D.C., actually. And I've thought about that a lot. And then more recently, I felt like the wave was receding. I don't know if that's a permanent receding or if it's just getting ready to be another big tsunami. I know that God is on the move. I don't have a real set end times theology, but what I do take is from the book of Daniel, where there's this rock that's cut without human hands that gets thrown at the idol that is the nations of the world and knocks it down, and then that rock grows into a mountain that covers the earth. So I believe the kingdom of God is going to grow and cover the earth, and I think there's a kingdom of God movement right now. Young men in the U.S. are turning to God in bigger numbers. And women tend to follow young men. So
that's probably the most dangerous thing you've said at a conference now.
Well, no, because, but I think there's a turning in this next generation. I think they've seen the devastation of the sexual revolution. They've seen the devastation from the Pride movement. So in most days I have a lot of hope that we haven't lost our soul. And that God's kingdom is going to grow and cover the earth. So I try to hold on to that.
To the extent that I can, just to reinforce what you said, this revival in the young people, and several of you have spoken about that, giving you great hope that young people who are beginning to speak or to see what's happening. And I think amongst other things too, with Izzy and Zara, and if you're still here, thank you so much for sharing what you did. It takes great courage. But again, it's young people speaking out, particularly against those in power. Amanda, in that euthanasia space where so much focus is on elements of our physicality, do you think we have lost our soul, or are there great signs of hope?
I also will repeat what I said yesterday, which is that hope is the essential antidote to so many of these crises, and that I agree that we've got to cooperate in a spirit of hope, also to preserve our stamina. in the culture. One of my best friends is very helpful to me when she reminds, in the midst of these cultural challenges, that we attend to the question of what is the legitimate longing here? What is the legitimate longing in the human's heart that is maybe getting disordered because of these ideologies, but these longings that we've heard of, to belong, to be affirmed, to be recognized, to have a community, these are all legitimate longings. And so I'm also thinking back to when I first started thinking about the assisted suicide issue, and I actually read in Augustine's book on the free choice of the will, he talks about suicide. And he says the desire to die is not actually a desire not to be. It's impossible to desire not to exist. Because instead, what people desire are goods. And I started to check against the accounts of people who were seeking assisted suicide, and it's true. People desire comfort, autonomy, dignity, security, accompaniment. These are all goods of life. So if we are sufficiently curious, as all of the testimonies here so invite us to be, then we can better attend to those legitimate longings for which we're made, and that our longings have an object is the basis of our hope.
And Kiralee, lucky last, what's the view from Australia?
Oh, I feel like I'm about to go into a big rant and rave. So
Go for it. We've got 37 minutes.
But other people might want to have us talk. Look, it's yes and no, because
You'd make a great politician.
Yeah,
with answers like that.
no. Australia at the moment is probably the most divided I've seen it in my lifetime, and it's not even, well, my background is in accidentally exposing halal certification schemes and the rot that was going on in Australia. So I'm a very accidental activist. I have a Bachelor of Theology, all of those sort of things. But multiculturalism in Australia is a failed experiment. And that might be controversial to some. Multi-ethnicity is a great thing and has been so wonderful for the soul of our nation. But this multicultural experiment has been absolutely devastating. And what we're seeing is a massive divide. And so I do agree, Dawn, what you said. There's a war on. There's an absolute war. And I take great hope in the Bible, and that it's not a shock or a surprise. We know that this is exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be a separation. There's going to be... Why do we need to be salt and light if everything is tasty and good? We have to... I think the time more than ever is we are the called out ones. I love that clothing brand that Izzy and Maria have launched, because we've got to look different. We've got to be different. We have to be the light. We have to speak the hope. We have to speak truth into a very dark and soulless culture that is rising up around us, and that tide is coming up. But we have the gift and the ability to stand firm in that. So I'll limit my rant and rave to that little bit. Hopefully it made sense.
It was a somewhat related, but again, a theme coming through a lot of the questions is a lot of what is seen as real or truthful has been perverted, for want of a better word. The sense of our great, deep sexuality and the gift that is, Jeff, Dawn, you've talked around again how pornography objectifies human beings. Euthanasia, assisted suicide, perverts the nature of death and suffering. And Kiralee, you've suffered directly by just speaking truth. And so much of it from opponents, and as people were saying in the Slido and elsewhere, it's driven by emotion, very short, simple statements and phrases in a society which laps it up. How do we speak that truth with life? How do we present the rational arguments which you and others have to bring about change? And Jeff, if I might start with your good self.
Okay, none of these are questions that I put on Slido, so I don't know why.
You haven't paid me enough money like these other three.
The gay community, they are masters at coming up with slogans. I will say that. And some of that is the spirit behind them. I'm not saying, that they're all demonized, but Satan is the father of lies. Mm-hmm. And our culture has come to believe many lies. And so we have to be honest about that, that he is behind a lot of this. But we have a deeper creative spirit behind us than they do. So the question about the first one you asked, is it hopeless? What I was thinking was that a lot of it depends on you guys. I'm just one guy sitting in my cube in Colorado Springs writing. I go out speaking occasionally. Focus is one ministry. There's 700 of us in a country with 300 million people. And we're standing for marriage and truth and life and family. But we're swamped. And I know people are busy, and that Christians especially, they're out raising families, and they're volunteering at church, and they're doing things in the community. But a lot of it is going to depend on what we all do. We are the church. We talk about the church sometimes like it's this sort of abstract thing, but that's me, that's my wife, that's you all. So it really does depend on whether people get a backbone. Like we've been hearing a lot this week. I guess Bob likes that phrase about stiffening our spine. But we're going to have to be speaking the truth. We're going to have to be loving people. And a lot of it's not going to be big and flashy stories like theirs was, or it's going to be one by one. And God's moving, but he moves through us. He uses us. And so that's a big part of us. It is that we're going to have to get creative. We're going to have to speak the truth. We're going to have to listen to God, say, what do you want me to do? What's my part in all this?
Carolee, what about yourself? What's your own reflections?
That was good, Jeff. I like that. Well, look, in my space particularly at the moment, it is very feelings and emotion driven, and it's not logic or reason or rationale. And so I had this image I believe God gave to me. So sometimes it's like we're playing chess on a rugby field and we're expecting, to not get hurt or not, that the rules are going to be the same. They're just different games and different rules, and it's really hard to bring reason and logic to the game when they're just bringing emotions and feelings. So we do need to be very creative. I believe in the power of, obviously, truth and logic and reason, and we have to use that, but it is love, and it is compassion, and it is creativity, and it is that staying force, like to not be moved, because again in my space it's so much. We saw it with Posey Parker here and everywhere else. They come, they're loud, they're aggressive, and it's usually untrue what they're screaming at us, and so it's just that ability to plant your feet, stay the course, let them get it off their chest if that's what needs to happen, and then continue on in building that relationship, because God's all about relationship, truth is about relationship, love is about relationship, so let's keep building those relationships and standing firm.
Dawn, to pick up on that word relationships into the question too, you have formed so many through your work. How have you found, again, that interplay between the often very emotional arguments and trying to bring in a rationality to things?
It's interesting. I just had kind of the opposite thought for the movement, the kind of area of the movement I'm working in, and that is we need more emotion in this area of human dignity, sexual exploitation, children's rights, parental rights, these kinds of things, because the other side has completely taken the emotion and the feeling and the reality of what's happening, like the humanness of all of this, out of the equation with the language they use. Like in our space, they couch sexual exploitation and some of the most horrific things and abuses you could do to a person in the terms of work. Like, this is just sex work. They've completely removed what's happening with the language that they've used. So, I used to say, when I started this, I wasn't a mom yet. And I got a media training. And the media training was, you can't be the mom with the pitchfork, like the crazy lady going through. But I am the mom with the pitchfork, right? I am the crazy lady. And I need to bring that because people listen. But also we have to counter that with facts, with research. On these issues, there are mountains of research on our side. We can make the arguments with heart and soul and emotion, but also with the facts. And I think we need to balance. But stories are what changes things. When Izzy and Zara were up here, oh my gosh, I suddenly understand at such a deeper level on the issues I work with. It's the survivors of sexual exploitation and abuse. When they speak up, executives, legislators, they listen. And so also, if we can make space for those who have these lived experiences to come and tell us what the answers are, we'll find our way.
I see lots of nodding, Amanda.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm thinking of a quotation I like very much that says, "Modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers. And if he does listen to a teacher, it's because he is also a witness, or she, whoever we can hear from with that firsthand testimony is bringing so much light and life." And I agree about the need for more emotion, more pathos for many of these topics. Specifically, I'm reminded of when I was working in that office of a member of parliament, and there were a few interns with whom I was working, and one of the interns in the office, he asked if he could meet with me for a few minutes in the office, and I said, yes, of course. And he said, I was just reading through the testimony of the sort of euthanasia proponents and also people on the other side, and he was so devastated by the discourse around the euthanasia expansion that he said, I just came back from the bathroom and I was crying. And this is a guy in his mid-20s, full of ideals, working on Parliament Hill, and he said, I never expected to cry working on Parliament Hill like this. And I thought for a second about how to respond to him, and then I just affirmed him and said, well, that is the correct response. And I would be concerned about you if you were not so moved in the course of this work. So we really do engage on topics that these are the things of tears. And a sign of our soul, a sign of our humanity, is when we do let ourselves be so moved.
Yeah. Turning to some more specific questions, I'm going to start, if I might, with you, Dawn. We were talking yesterday, the day before, and obviously very big, broad policy areas which you're engaged with, and thank you for the insights you gave us there. But I know a lot of parents here in particular would welcome, particularly in that tech space or the ubiquity of pornography that's around, sort of some practical thoughts and advice that you would give them, because obviously we target the politicians, we can target the Metas and the Googles, but if you're parents with young children who are downloading these apps or finding violent images, pornographic images, what's some practical suggestions and advice you'd give them?
Oh, I have a lot to share with you, but love them. I mean, we've talked about that a lot today. Just love them and be there for them. Help them walk through the journey. Help them make sense of what they've just consumed and how it's impacting them, how it's shaping their feelings and their perspectives. I think back to my own dad. He did it so perfectly. Like when I went to him and said what I had seen, I can't even believe I shared this with you because I almost never share with others, but he just sat with me and told me that I was worth more. You know, he explained what's right and wrong. But also, you guys, we need boundaries and guardrails, and we need to use the tools that are at our disposal to try to minimize our kids' exposure to these things. So use those things, and they're not perfect, and they're frustrating. I mean, my goodness, it takes me hours. We just got a new laptop for our daughter. Monday, I'll be spending the whole day trying to get it set up for safety. But we do need to do those things. And then we need to explain to our kids why we're doing it. But keeping the conversation open for them is so critical so that they can come to you. You don't want them going to Google to look up these things. Oh, you guys, okay. One of my favorite tools is called Bark. You guys should look it up. It's so good. But when our son was he 9? My husband's right here. He looked up the word masturbation on YouTube because our nephew had mentioned it to him and he didn't really know what it was. Just imagine what would have happened if I didn't have those tools set up, right? And then amazingly, because we got a notification that he was curious and searching, what a really powerful conversation we could have at his level, and so that he came to us, and now he knows to come to us whenever he has these kinds of problems instead of to YouTube. So those are some practical things. I have a lot of resources. There's one of my favorite groups is called Protect Young Eyes. Another one is Defend Young Minds, and they've got incredible just talking points, books, things like that you can use with your kids or grandchildren.
Oh, thank you for that. Jeff, with yourself and what you were sharing, again, some of the questions are going down the difference between particularly a Christian sense of love versus what we hear a lot from the LGBTI side of love. And you could broaden that out more widely into that diversity, equity and inclusion. is that the words are expressed in the opposite. We don't see a diversity of thought. We don't see much inclusion. I mean, sort of blending, if you will, the political, the policy, and the practical. I mean, what are the differences that you see between a Christian approach to love and what other groups are saying?
You know, one of the things, I'm studying spiritual formation at university. I'm working on a master's on that. How does God shape us through various spiritual disciplines and the things that we do? And I read a book that got me really interested in that again. I've always been interested in that, is how does God change people? But this book blended attachment theory with spiritual formation. And I think you kind of hit on this, Amanda. I think we all want to attach, and we were made to connect. We were made to connect with God. We all know, I guess it's Pascal who talks about the God-shaped hole, but we also have people-shaped holes. And people are longing for connection. You can't get that from a screen. You can't get that from a computer. And the LGBT community, I think people are longing to connect, and they're going about it all the wrong ways. And so I think they need people. I needed people to reach out to me in love. When I was involved in that, I was only involved in it for a couple of years, but it was very exciting, and I was young, and we kind of joke about it that, you know, fresh meat kind of thing that young people are in that community. But then you start to feel like you're being used by people. And so in the church, we can't operate that that way. We want to connect heart to heart with love. Sometimes I find myself saying some of the simplest things over and over again. You know, God made us male and female. There's boys and girls. They're different from each other. Marriage is between a husband and wife. And when St. John was old, the story is that as he was being brought into church, he would just say, "Little children, love one another." Mm. And I think people are really longing for that. When I came back to the church, it was men and women. You know, I was bitter, I was angry, I was sarcastic, I was crusty. I thought I knew all the answers because I'd grown up in the church, but they loved me right where I was. Mm-hmm. And that was transformational for me. Mm-hmm. And so if we can do that, and that doesn't happen by me speaking on a platform, that happens by me going and talking to somebody and connecting with them. And that happens with you guys going and talking and being with people and connecting and spending time, not giving them all the answers, not telling them what to do. I didn't need anyone to do that. I just needed people to accept me where I was, spend time with me, and connect with me.
I can't help myself here to gently and quickly jump in, because one of the things as you spoke that resonated with me, we're always and everywhere born into relationship. It's the very nature of being human, obviously as a son or daughter of God, but from the moment you're conceived, you are a son or a daughter to a mother, and then to your father and to family. You're always in relationship, and I think it's one of our most deepest cravings. Amanda, I'm going to out you here because you gave me this question, but I think it's a jolly decent one, and it's been echoed by a number of people actually on the Slido as well, which is, what do you say to someone who is considering euthanasia or assisted suicide? Or what do you say to the wider family who is encouraging a loved one towards euthanasia? What's the practical, hope-filled suggestions?
Yes, I thought it would be good to put this on the table because this is really what I'm hearing whenever I'm speaking in Canada, given that this is touching people personally and practically every day. And people are wondering how to accompany, how to be in relationship, how to give support to the person without pushing them off the ledge if they're contemplating ending their life. And I did say the other day that mounting resistance to what is suicidal ideation is an act of love, and we don't do that, I would add, through abstractions or through arguments. Even good ones like, you are in God's image, you have human dignity. We have to we have to stake our very selves on them. We have to start to say, I love you too much to see you go through with this. You are my brother. You are my father. Words that help us find that relation by means of the word my, that put you into the context of community and relationship. I also very much like how one of my friends put it when she said that you could say, it would be a mercy for you not to go through with this and leave me wondering for the rest of my life what I did wrong. That's a kind of suicide prevention. I think we also have to encourage that the way that we die is part of our life's story in a really profound way. There was a mother of a large family, and she was dying of cancer, and she put it so astutely when she said, how a story ends changes the meaning of every page. How a story ends changes the meaning of every page. So when we come alongside, and maybe we're accompanying someone who's tempted to euthanasia, another thing that I would very much encourage, whatever your relationship to that person, is to put yourself in the posture before that sick or suffering or dying person, to have the posture of, what would you like to teach me? What do you intend to communicate to me? Because usually in that moment, people think that they've got nothing left to give, which is why they think they have nothing left to live. But as soon as you put someone in the position of a teacher, especially if you're younger than them, they will often exceed and excel themselves. They will outdo themselves in the counsel and the goodwill that they show to those around them. And it can also become a basis for transcendence, to get out of themselves and the narrowness of the horizon of their own suffering. So those are some things. And to be willing, I love the way that one spiritual writer I read put it. He says, we have to be willing to risk our own faith by being in solidarity with the one who suffers. That we identify with them so much that we're willing to join them in questioning God about suffering. And that kind of solidarity, that compassion, which is a communion in suffering of those who love, is the relationship that redeems the suffering.
We're going to have to talk afterwards about who that one was. That's quite good. Before I'm coming to Kiralee. As a heads up, I've been told by a few people, Bob, that we've mentioned through the course of the day a certain past Prime Minister too much, including her name and image. It's traumatising people. She's tended to divide the country. But I'm going to reference, Kiralee, another Prime Minister who does come from the same party, and it's not to pick on him, but a certain Christopher Hipkins, then Prime Minister, could not define what a woman was. And it's not so much about him, but why has that question become so difficult in society? Why is it so difficult for many of us, if not all of us here, to discuss issues around sexuality or gender? How has it become so challenging?
Yeah, look, I mean, this was one of the first campaigns we ran as the binary organisation straight after the same-sex marriage plebiscite in Australia, and that was, what is a woman? Because we recognise that if we can answer that and with facts and reason, then it pretty much addresses all the other issues that we have to deal with. Because if we know that a woman is an adult human female and the man is an adult human male, then they can't come at our 3 and 4 year old children and tell them that they can change their sex, that they can't give someone drugs and lie to them and say, if you take this drug, you're a man, but you'll become a woman. Because if we can define exactly what a woman is, then it really takes care of every other issue in this space, because you've got that solid anchor, marker point, plumb line, whatever you want to call it, and every question that comes after what is a woman can be resolved because we have determined this is what a woman is. If a woman is determined by our physiology, then yeah, no drug, no costume, no feeling, no teaching, no ideology can change that. And that's why that question is up for grabs. And that's why politicians, unfortunately, who are the legislators, the lawmakers, refuse to answer that question and do this circular, anyone who identifies as a woman is a woman, which is utter nonsense. And very few people call them out on that. You can't identify as something that's not defined. We can't protect women. We know that, throughout history and in every culture, women are the vulnerable ones. We are the ones who are vulnerable to sexual exploitation and domestic violence and abuse and things like that. And so it's really important to define that. It's really important that we keep pressing for that to be defined, because then we can safeguard children, we can have parental rights, we can have women and girls protected in law.
My mind was going to go to a different question, but you talked around changing politics. It might actually start with you, Amanda. A lot of people are asking, or have been asking, and they were actually asking me for the answer, but I'm in control here, so I'm going to delegate it across. Do politicians, can they bring about change? Is this where the focus should be given, or we should be starting downstream of that?
Both. Both, certainly. There's a politician who was recently elected in Canada, and he has begun sharing his personal story of having attempted suicide, and now he's speaking out as a new MP about supporting a private member's bill to make the pause permanent on that expansion of euthanasia to those with mental illness that is set to take effect in 2027. And the video that he released just a couple weeks ago sharing his own story has tremendous power. I think there we have a tremendous synthesis in story and witness and the work of politics. And the way that his colleagues shared that video in a way that they might not have shared something that came from a think tank or a kind of predictable organization was really interesting. And so I think when those who are in positions of influence within the society, whether church leaders or politicians or heads of organizations, bear their own wounds, it has that credibility that helps bring a synthesis between culture and politics.
Dawn, obviously you've spent years lobbying into the political realm with success. I mean, what would be one or two of the tips that you could share with people here of how they might engage with their elected officials and others?
One of my goals about 10 years ago was to make the issue of sexual abuse and exploitation an issue that Congress would care about. And I would call offices and ask to talk to the person who would be in charge of these issues, and nobody had anybody who would cover these. Now, if you call a member of Congress's office and you ask to speak to someone that covers these issues, every single office has someone assigned to these. And I think, I just really believe that there's a debate constantly. I'm often in the middle of it. Does culture start down here and law follows, or can you influence it at the law side and then culture follows? And I think, like Amanda said, it needs to be at both levels, but I see this really powerful lever that you can pull at the policy side. And just an example. Okay, so I've been fighting for App Store accountability, right? I mentioned this a bit since about 2017. I have been meeting with Google about once a quarter since then, asking them to do better, showing them problems, not just about apps, or about a bunch of things. And finally, this year, we got a bill introduced in 12 states, and it passed in 3, the App Store Accountability Act, and it's introduced federally as well. And in my meeting with Google 2 months ago, they were like, why didn't you come to us before? Because Google's pushing back, right? And Apple heavily, they're spending millions of dollars. They actually called the governor of Texas, tried to get him to veto the bill, which was a huge thing. And they're like, why did you have to take it to the legislation? And I'm like, are you kidding? But you guys, they wouldn't listen until bills were written and introduced and brought forward and were passing with almost unanimous consent across the board. So there's power in policy, and I think it really does affect our culture. And so please add your voices. And also, they get so annoyed when we're messaging them and calling them. I think if they just hear from 1, 2, 3 of us, they're willing to listen and take some action. So your voice really, really matters.
Carolee, you've been at the pointy end of what politicians are saying, and of course the very pointy end of the law. I mean, what's your advice to people here about how they can affect change in that political policy process?
Yeah, well, we've done the both-pronged attack as well in terms of raising public awareness and lobbying politically, because, and it's getting... what's happened in America has been really great in so many ways, that the Leah Thomas, the swimmer in particular, really highlighted the insanity of males in female sport, and that public groundswell obviously emboldened Trump to, every single time on his campaign trail to say, we're going to get men out of women's sport. And, I don't know if that was his personal opinion or not, but he read the room and he knew that was a winning policy, and then he's written the executive orders, and it means that now our country anyway will have the conversation somewhat. But I will tell a quick story as well. Some of the parents in our book and a few others went and visited politicians, federal politicians in Canberra, to tell their stories, because I agree that getting the story and testimony is really important. And one of the parents said, my son has had his genitalia cut off, and went into great detail about the tragedy of that. And this dead set, a lawmaker in Australia, a politician who writes the law, goes, can't they just put it back on?
I am so tempted to ask you right now who that is, but I won't. I am so tempted.
My own local federal MP, who has since retired, when I told him that there are males in female prisons and that, they can self-identify as female, and get housed, these are violent sex criminals, he said, what? And they got all their junk? They've got all their junk and they're in the female prison. And he was laughing, absolutely laughing. So these are our lawmakers. The people who literally write the laws have no idea of what's happening on the ground in real life. When we talk about what's happening with the children and the puberty blockers, they all believe the rhetoric that it's reversible. So there's a lot of work, at least in my country, to be done to have these conversations. And what I'm up against then is that they've written laws to silence us, to not have these conversations. So there is power in the people. Part of the reason I did say last night is I'm in this mess is because we got 12,000 people to send emails to the politicians, to the Football Australia and politicians, and they went, oh, we're not having this. This makes us feel really uncomfortable. We better censor her. We better shut her up. And then by extension, hopefully shut everyone else up. So I think the answer is we've got to keep raising that awareness. And I agree, Amanda. Dawn, we've found in Australia that you only need 10, 15 phone calls to an office of an MP, and they're basically ringing us going, make them stop. We don't want any more. We'll talk to you.
To my current colleagues who are probably now trembling on that advice, it is good advice, actually, to take the time to call, to be in action. If I might, it's not just the leaders up here and in the front.
I'll just add that, and take the time to build the relationship with your local representatives. They are there to represent you and your views. And if they don't hear from you, you can be sure they're hearing from the lobbyists on the other side. So make sure they're hearing from you. Even if they're the most rabid, lefty, crazy person, they still need to go to bed at the end of the day or stand at the end of the day and go, well, I did hear the opposing view. I have heard it. You have every right to have your view heard.
And if I could issue a further challenge, since this is such a committed bunch, bring one person to the meeting who wouldn't likely be going on their own. Maybe someone who's less likely to have a voice or a platform or to get to share their story with a perspective that can be brought to bear to that legislator.
Jeff, not to lead you out, obviously with your work at Focus on the Family, any tips to the good folk here of, again, how to engage politically and successfully?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. One, of course, the law is important. I mean, Paul says the law is a teacher. So when our Supreme Court declared that, totally redefined what marriage was, that's what you have to tell kids in school, that marriage can be between any two people who love each other. So when they changed the law, that changed what kids are taught. I'm not a silver bullet person, and I don't trust people with, this is the one thing we have to do. What I've seen in the States that has brought about some of these changes is athletes speaking out, moms groups forming, dads shouting and reading from dirty books at school board meetings. It's been a lot of different things that have brought about some of these changes. And so, obviously I can't do everything, you can't do everything, but you can pick one thing and do it, and do it well. And, then after a while, you might add something else to the repertoire. You guys have gone after laws, but you've also gone after businesses, too, which has been very effective, hitting them in the pocketbooks. So there's a lot of different areas, arts and entertainment, that for a lot of years, I think, many of us in the church, or many churches said, Jesus is coming back. We don't want to get involved in worldly things, the whole fundamentalist evangelical movement. And I think people are starting to wake up, but it's going to take a lot of different people involved in a lot of those different areas. not just one thing.
And if I might draw out one part you said just a few moments ago, it's for each and every one of us to do something.
Yeah.
Something. Because I am conscious we're coming towards the end, so this is in one way a softball question, but at the same time a chance for each of you, and might start, if it's okay with you, Jeff. Each of you in your different way have spoken about the power of story, which particularly in the Christian context makes a lot of sense, because the whole point of Christ is the word, the logos, the good news, the evangelion, the word, the story. It has real power. And each of you have shared your stories, and just wonder as a moment to wrap up, either to reflect on the nature of story or a quick anecdote that you might like to end on.
Yeah, I grew up knowing all the Bible stories, but also with a lot of emphasis on theology. And the Bible isn't, I don't know where Zara is, but the Bible isn't a systematic theology. It really is a bunch of stories, and it's the story of God's interaction with people. And so story is really important. We get some good theology out of that, but theology isn't the end-all and the be-all. So narratives are important. Truth is important. Going after all these different areas is important. But yeah, stories are powerful, and they change how we think and feel about people.
Amanda, that's been a big part of your work, particularly in that social media space or digital space.
Yeah, just to pick up a bit on what you just said, Jeff, I think a lot in reflecting on stories in Scripture that there's a before and there's an after whenever there's been an encounter with Christ. There's a before and there's an after in a person's life, and often that's occasioned by a look or a touch or a word. So many simple moments of profound encounter, and we can make a difference because the difference has first of all been made in us, because of a word we received, because of someone else's gaze that looked at us and saw that we are good. So hopefully we can continue to renew ourselves so that we can bring that word, that gaze, that look of love, that tenderness that revives people, that brings them up to their proper dignity.
Carolee, amongst many things you've done, you've empowered the story of others through your book.
Yeah, and we really, I personally and our organisation really believes in the power of story. So we did 9 stories in our first book. We tell the stories of detransitioners on our website. And I just, on a personal level, I was challenged many years ago when I became a Christian to try and identify with characters in the Bible. Who do you identify and why? Where's the fear? Where's the triumph? Where's the isolation? Like whatever it is, and to go into that mindset of looking at how you identify, because you're not the only one. Like you're not alone it's your unique story, but the common threads are there for all of us. I love the Chosen TV series just for who you can relate to in that, and sometimes it's Peter and sometimes it's Mary and sometimes it's different people, but having that ability to look at story, to reflect on your own story. And I loved what the Falaus said, like in this world we're going to have trouble. No one's going to avoid that. And if we're going to follow Jesus, then we're definitely going to have trouble. So make your decision before the trouble. And if you've already had the trouble, go back and make the decision now. What are you going to stand for? Like, what are you going to stand for? What is important? What is worth living for? What is worth dying for? And that's where my courage comes from anyway, just to be able to go, I serve an audience of one. Like, it's really nice to have all of your support, but I mean it when I say, so I'm going to change what I've set my, eyes to, because God is the one who determines all of these things for me. He's the one who's the ultimate judge. The judge can say whatever she likes in a court in Sydney. It's not going to change what the ultimate judge will say. So know who he is. That's where we get our identity from. But our story is a part of his story, history. So,
thank you. You're echoing some of Maria's words as well. It'd be interesting what Izzy's saying to her now across the Zoom call. Dawn, the penultimate word to your good self. You've shared such amazing stories yourself, but final word.
I have a lot of comments about stories, but stories change hearts. I mean, this is a heart issue. All these things we're talking about are heart issues, and I used to give presentations with like slides and slides of research and statistics because I thought like I needed to just use reason to help people understand, but it's a heart issue, and the research is all there, and it still is really powerful, but we need to elevate the kind of lived experiences of our brothers and sisters, of ourselves. But at the same time, I put up a caution, because we have found ourselves, especially I think in the Christian movement, exploiting others' stories. And it's traumatic. Look, the area that I work in of sexual trauma and abuse, it takes so much to recount those experiences, to process it, to heal, to get pulled back into it. So just being honoring of each other. And I will say what I found, and I think that the magic sauce in the policy space and in my kind of corporate advocacy is survivors and just giving them a chance to say what needs to happen. But what I have found is they usually actually don't even have to tell their stories, because when they start to speak about what the solution needs to be, the conviction is just there. Like, you know that they know this is the answer. And the politicians and the executives of these mega corporations, they lean in and listen with power. And so also story is important, but we need to be careful we're not further exploiting people and resurfacing that trauma. And often the story that's just behind you gives you the, like, people will listen to you because of it. So I leave you with that.
I think that's a wonderful... I'll just stop briefly. Just waking people up. No. A wonderful place to end. Can I thank the four of you, and actually through the four of you to our other speakers too, to Izzy and Zara, Izzy and Maria, and to Miriam, for sharing your stories, because obviously you're bringing your experiences, your advocacy, but for me, and I'm sure for everyone here, you brought yourselves, your authentic selves and your stories. And so will you join me in thanking Carolee and Jeff, Dawn and Amanda?